Jesus, Mary, and Joseph begin the journey to Egypt, accompanied by the angelic spirits. They arrive at the city of Gaza. Our heavenly pilgrims left Jerusalem and entered upon their banishment while yet the silence and obscurity of night held sway. They were full of solicitude for the pledge of heaven, which they carried with them into a strange and unknown land. Although faith and hope strengthened them, for in no other beings could these virtues be more firmly and securely established than in our Queen and her most faithful spouse. Nevertheless, the Lord afforded them occasion for anxiety. Their love for the infant Jesus would naturally excite in them anxiety and suffering on an occasion like this. They knew not what would happen during such a long journey, nor when it should end, nor how they would fare in Egypt, where they would be entire strangers, nor what comfort or convenience they would find there for raising the child, nor even how they would be able to ward off great sufferings from him on the way to Egypt. Therefore the hearts of these holy parents were filled with many misgivings and anxious thoughts when they parted with so much haste from their lodging place. But their sorrow was much relieved when the 10,000 heavenly courtiers above mentioned again appeared to them in human forms, and in their former splendor and beauty, and when they again changed the night into the brightest day for the holy pilgrims. As they set forth from the portals of the city, the holy angels humiliated themselves and adored the incarnate Word in the arms of the Virgin Mother. They also encouraged her by again offering their homage and service, stating that it was the will of the Lord that they guide and accompany her on the journey. To the afflicted heart, the least consolation seems precious. Hence, this one, being in itself a great relief, comforted our Queen and her spouse Joseph very much. They therefore entered upon their journey with good heart, choosing the way which led through the city gate in the direction of Nazareth. The Heavenly Mother longed to visit again the place of the Nativity in order to venerate the sacred cave and the crib which had offered shelter and hospitality to her most holy Son at his entrance into the world. But the holy angels, knowing of her unspoken desires, said to her, quote, "Our Queen and Lady, Mother of our Creator, it behooves us to hasten on our journey without any delay, for on account of the escape of the Magi kings and their failure to return to Jerusalem, and on account of the words spoken by the priest Simeon and by Anne, the people have been roused to attention. Some of them have begun to say that thou art the mother of the Messiah, others that thou knowest of him, and others say that thy son is a prophet. Various rumors are also spread about concerning the visit of the kings in Bethlehem, and of all these things Herod is informed. He has commanded that you be sought after very carefully, and consequently a most diligent search is being made to find you. On this account, the Most High has commanded you to fly at night and with so much haste." Unquote. The Queen of Heaven yielded to the will of the Almighty, thus made known to her by the holy angels. She therefore reverenced from afar the sacred place of the birth of her only begotten, renewing the memory of the mysteries there wrought and the favors there received. The holy angel who stood as guard of the sacred cave approached them on their way in visible form and adored the incarnate Word in the arms of his mother. As she was thus allowed to see this angel and speak to him, the heavenly lady was rejoiced and comforted still more. She would have also preferred to travel by way of Hebron, since it was only a short distance from the one they were now traveling, and Elizabeth was just at that time in that city with her son John. But the anxiety of St. Joseph, who was more timid, prevented also this diversion and delay, for he said to his heavenly spouse, quote, "My lady, I think it is extremely important that we do not delay our journey, even for one instant, and that we hasten as much as possible to flee from the place of danger. Therefore, it would not be prudent to go to Hebron, where they will find us more easily than in any other parts of the country." Unquote. It continues. "Let it be according to," she says, "Let it be according to thy pleasure," answered the humble queen. Quote, "Yet I wish that thou give me permission to send one of these celestial spirits to Elizabeth in order to inform my cousin of the cause of our flight, so that she herself may protect her son from the wrath of Herod for the wrath of Herod is so roused that it will extend to them." Unquote. The Queen of Heaven knew of the design to murder the children, but she did not tell St. Joseph of it at that time. Here I must marvel at the obedience and humility of Most Holy Mary, which was so exquisite and rare, for she obeyed St. Joseph not only in that which he commanded, but also in that which concerned herself alone, namely, in the matter of sending an angel to St. Elizabeth. Although she could have sent the angel by a mere wish, without even expressing it in words, she nevertheless preferred not to do so without permission and in obedience to her spouse. I must confess my shame and my negligence, since having before my eyes the most pure fountain of waters, I do not satiate my thirst, nor profit by the light and example before me, though it is so vivid, so sweet, so powerful, and so attractive in teaching us all to abjure our own reprehensible wills. With the permission of St. Joseph, then Most Holy Mary dispatched one of the principal angels of her guard in order to notify St. Elizabeth of what was passing. As the sovereign of the angelic spirits, she instructed her messenger on this occasion what he was to say to the holy matron and to the child John. The angel, according to the order and pleasure of the Queen, proceeded to inform the fortunate and blessed Elizabeth of all these events as far as was proper. He told her that the Mother of God was fleeing before the wrath of Herod into Egypt, as this tyrant was now searching for the child in order to kill it. He warned her to see to the safety of St. John by hiding him in some place of refuge. He also manifested to her other mysteries of the incarnate Word, according to the command of the Heavenly Mother. The Holy Elizabeth was filled with joy and wonder at this message, and she expressed her desire to meet and adore the infant Jesus and to see his mother, asking him whether they could be reached. The holy angel answered that his King and Lord was passing with his mother at a distance from Hebron and could not wait for her visit. St. Elizabeth, therefore, gave up on her project. Overflowing with tender and tearful affection, she asked the angel to bring affectionate greetings to the son and mother. The angel then returned with his message to the Queen. St. Elizabeth immediately dispatched a servant with some gifts consisting in provisions, money, and material for clothing the infant. She foresaw their needs in a strange country and instructed the servant to overtake them with all haste. He met them in Gaza, which lies a little less than 20 hours from Jerusalem, on the river Besor, and on the road from Palestine to Egypt, not far from the Mediterranean Sea. In this town they remained 2 days, for St. Joseph and the beast of burden which carried the Queen were worn out by the fatigue of the journey. From that place they sent back the servants of St. Elizabeth, taking care to caution him not to tell any one of their whereabouts. But God provided still more effectually against this danger, for he took away from this man all remembrance of what St. Joseph had charged him to conceal, so that he retained only his message to St. Elizabeth. Most Holy Mary expended the presents sent by Elizabeth in entertaining the poor, for she, who was mother of the poor, could not bear to pass them by unassisted. Of the clothes sent to her, she made a cloak for the divine infant, and one for St. Joseph, to shelter them from the discomforts of the season and of the journey. She also used other things in their possession for the comfort of her child and St. Joseph. The most prudent Virgin would not rely on miraculous assistance whenever she could provide for the daily needs by her own diligence and labor, for in these matters she desired to subject herself to the natural order and depend upon her own efforts. During the 2 days which they spent in that city, the most pure Mary, in order to enrich it with great blessings, performed some wonderful deeds. She freed two sick persons from the danger of death and cured their ailments. She restored to another person, a crippled woman, the use of her limbs. In the souls of many who met her and conversed with her, she caused divine effects of the knowledge of God and of a change of life. All of them felt themselves moved to praise their Creator, but neither Mary nor Joseph spoke a word about their native country, nor of the destination or object of their journey, for if this information had been added to the public notice caused by their wonderful actions, the attention of Herod's agents might have been drawn toward them, and they might have found sufficient inducement to follow them after their departure. Words fail me to describe what I have been made to understand concerning the happenings during this journey of Jesus and Mary. Moreover, I fall short of the sentiments of reverence and piety which such admirable mysteries would require. The arms of the most pure Mary continually served as a delightful couch for the new and real King Solomon, Canticles 3:7, as she penetrated in spirit into the secret of the most holy humanity of Christ. It happened sometimes that the Son and Mother interchanged sweet colloquies and canticles of praise in honor especially of the infinite essence of God and of all his attributes and perfections. On these occasions, the Son of God favored his sovereign Mother with new visions of intellectual clearness, in which she perceived the unity of essence in the three persons of God, the operations ad intra in the generation of the Word, and in the procession of the Holy Spirit. She perceived how the three are from eternity, and how the Word is generated by the operation of the eternal intellect, and the Holy Ghost is breathed forth in the operation of the will, how there is no need of any succession of before or after, but how all is from eternity, and how it happens that we conceive these operations with the idea of duration or succession of time. She also perceived how these three persons comprehend each other by one and the same act of understanding, and how this comprehension includes the divinity of the incarnate Word united to the humanity, forming one person, and what effects this union produces in the humanity. Excuse me. Filled with this exalted knowledge, the great lady, my goodness. Filled with this exalted knowledge, the great lady allowed her thoughts to descend from the divinity to the humanity, and composed new canticles of praise and thanksgiving for the creation of this sacred humanity. Most perfect in soul and body, the soul in its plenitude and all possible abundance of wisdom, gifts, and graces of the Holy Ghost, the body most pure and in the highest possible degree well composed and complexioned. Then again she contemplated the exalted and heroic activity of all his faculties, and, having in her soul imitated him therein, she passed on to bless and give him thanks for having made her his mother, caused her to be conceived without sin, chosen her out of the thousands, enriched her with all the favors and gifts of his powerful right hand as far as was possible in a mere creature. In the exultation and glory of these and other mysteries, the child spoke to his mother, and she responded in words which are beyond the tongue of angels, and beyond the conception of any other created being. To all this the heavenly lady attended, without neglecting the care and comfort of her child, giving him nourishment at her breast 3 times a day, tenderly caressing him as a mother more attentive and loving than all other mothers combined could be toward their children. At other times she said to him, quote, "My sweetest and most beloved son, permit me to speak to thee and to manifest to thee my desires, although thou, my Lord, already knowest them. Permit me to be delighted in the sound of thy voice. Tell me, life of my soul, and light of my eyes, whether the labors of this journey are fatiguing thee, whether the rigors of the season and of the weather cause thee affliction, and what I can do for thy service and for thy relief." Unquote. And the divine infant answered, quote, "All the labors, O mother, and all fatigue are most light and sweet to me, since I undergo them for the honor of my eternal Father, and for the instruction and redemption of men, especially in thy company." Unquote. The child wept a few times, yet in great serenity and in the manner of a grown-up and perfect man, and immediately the loving mother sought the interior cause of these tears, finding it in his soul. She understood that they were tears of love and compassion for the salvation of men, and caused by their ingratitude. In this sorrow and weeping, the sweetest mother imitated him. She was wont to answer his tearful plaints like a compassionate turtle dove, lovingly caressing and soothing him as his affectionate mother, and kissing him with matchless reverence. The fortunate Joseph often witnessed these divine mysteries and shared in some of the enlightenments, thus consoling himself for the hardships of the journey. At other times he would converse with his spouse as they journeyed along, asking her frequently whether she desired any service for herself or for the child, or he would approach and adore the infant, kissing his feet and asking his blessing, and sometimes taking him in his arms. By these little offices of kindness, the great patriarch sweetened his labors, being at the same time consoled and encouraged by his heavenly spouse. To all things she attended with a magnanimous heart, being hindered neither by her interior prayer nor by her exalted and fervent contemplation for attending to the corporal affairs, for in all things she was most perfect. Instruction given me by my heavenly mother and mistress. My dearest daughter, for thy instruction and imitation, I wish, in what thou hast written, that thou take as an example the affectionate wonder which the divine light caused in my soul at seeing my most holy Son subject himself to the inhuman fury of wicked men, such as was shown by Herod in this occasion of our flight from his wrath, and afterwards by the perverse servants of the high priests and magistrates. In all the works of the Most High, his greatness, goodness, and infinite wisdom shine forth. But, since my understanding, by means of the most exalted inspiration, penetrated so deeply into the very essence of God in the person of the Word united to the divinity, and since I knew that my most holy Son was the eternal, all-powerful, infinite Creator and Preserver of all things, and that this iniquitous king depended for his life and existence entirely upon this very beneficence, I was particularly struck with wonder to see the most sacred humanity pray and beseech his eternal Father to confer upon Herod at this very time enlightenment, help, and blessing, to see my Son, who had it so much in his power to punish him, by his prayers, prevent the full measure of chastisement which he deserved. Although Herod's purpose was frustrated, yet this obstinate reprobate was visited with less chastisement than would have been given to him if my holy Son had not prayed for him. All this, and whatever else is contained in this matchless mercy and kindness of Jesus, I sought to imitate, for as a teacher he taught me thus early what he afterwards inculcated by his actions, words, and example concerning the love of enemies. Matthew 5:44. When I perceive how he concealed and disguised his infinite power, and how, being the invincible lion, he became a meek and humble lamb, Isaiah 5:29, amidst the fury of ravenous wolves, my heart was overwhelmed and my faculties failed me in the ardent desire of loving him, imitating and following him in his love, charity, patience, and meekness. This example I place before thee for thy constant imitation, so that thou mayest understand to what extremes thou must be willing to bear and suffer, forgive and love all who offend thee. For neither thou nor other creatures are innocent and without fault, and many are burdened with numerous and oft-repeated sins, by which they have merited all offenses and insults. Now, if persecutions afford thee the advantage of imitating him, why shouldest thou not esteem them as a great blessing? Why shouldest thou not love those who give thee occasion to practice this highest perfection? Why not thank them for this benefit, and hold them not as enemies, but as benefactors, who afford thee a chance to obtain what is of so much importance for thy welfare? On account of the object lesson contained in this history, thou wilt not be without guilt if thou fall short in this matter, for the divine light and all that thou perceivest and understandest through it is, as it were, before thy eyes, as in a living example. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph pursue their journey from the city of Gaza to Heliopolis in Egypt. On the third day after our pilgrims had touched Gaza, they departed from that city for Egypt. Soon leaving the inhabited parts of Palestine, they entered the sandy deserts of Bersabe, which they were obliged to traverse for 60 leagues in order to arrive and take their abode in Heliopolis, the present Cairo in Egypt. This journey through the desert consumed a number of days, for the distance they could travel each day was but short, not only on account of the laborious progress over the deep sand, but also on account of the hardships occasioned by the want of shelter. There were many incidents on their way through this solitude. I will mention some of them, from which others can be conjectured, for it is not necessary to relate all of them. In order to understand how much Mary and Joseph and also the infant Jesus suffered on their pilgrimage, it must be remembered that the Almighty permitted His only begotten, with His most holy Mother and Saint Joseph, to suffer the inconveniences and hardships naturally connected with travel through this desert. And although the Heavenly Lady made no complaints, yet she was much afflicted, which was also true of her most faithful husband. For both of them suffered many personal inconveniences and discomforts, while the mother, in addition thereto, was afflicted still more on account of the sufferings of her son and of Saint Joseph. And the latter was deeply grieved not to be able, by his diligence and care, to ease the hardships of the child and his spouse. During all this journey of 60 leagues through the desert, they had no other night shelter than the sky and open air. Moreover, it was in the time of winter, for this journey took place in the month of February, only 6 days after the purification, as was indicated in the last chapter. In the first night on these sandy plains, they rested at the foot of a small hill, this being the only protection they could find. The Queen of Heaven, with the child in her arms, seated herself on the earth, and with her husband she ate of the victuals brought with them from Gaza. The Empress of Heaven also nursed the infant Jesus at her breast, and he on his part rejoiced his mother and her husband by his contentment. In order to furnish them with some kind of shelter against the open air, however narrow and humble it might be, Saint Joseph formed a sort of tent for the divine word, and Most Holy Mary by means of his cloak and some sticks. During that night the 10,000 angels who, full of marvel, assisted these earthly pilgrims in visible human shapes, formed a guard around their king and queen. The great lady perceived that her divine Son offered up to the Eternal Father the hardships and labors both of himself and of Mary and Joseph. In these prayers and in the other acts of his deified soul, the Queen joined him for the greater part of the night. The divine infant slept for a short time in her arms, while she continued wakeful and engaged in heavenly colloquies with the Most High and his angels. Saint Joseph slept upon the ground, resting his head upon the chest, which contained the clothing and other articles of their baggage. On the next day they pursued their journey, and their little store of fruit and bread was soon exhausted, so that they began to suffer great want and to feel the hunger. Although Saint Joseph was more deeply concerned, yet both of them felt this privation very much. On one of the first days of their journey they partook of no sustenance until 9 o'clock at night, not having any more even of the coarse and poor food which until then had sustained them in their hardships and labor. As nature demanded some refreshment after the exertion and weariness of travel, and as there was no way of supplying their want by natural means, the Heavenly Lady addressed herself to the Most High in these words, quote, "Eternal, great, and powerful God, I give thee thanks and bless thee for thy magnificent bounty, and also that, without my merits, only on account of thy merciful condescension, thou gavest me life and being, and preservest me in it, though I am but dust and a useless creature. I have not made a proper return for all these benefits. Therefore, how can I ask for myself what I cannot repay? But, my Lord and Father, look upon thy only begotten, and grant me what is necessary to sustain my natural life, and also that of my spouse, so that I may serve thy majesty, and thy word made flesh for the salvation of men." Unquote. In order that the clamors of the sweetest mother might proceed from yet greater tribulation, the Most High permitted the elements to afflict them more than at other times, and in addition to the sufferings caused by their fatigue, destitution, and hunger. For there arose a storm of wind and rain, which harassed and blinded them by its fury. This hardship grieved still more the tender-hearted and loving mother, on account of the delicate child which was not yet 50 days old. Although she tried to cover and protect him as much as possible, yet she could not prevent him from feeling the inclemency of the weather, so that he shed tears and shivered from the cold in the same manner as other children are wont to do. Then the anxious mother, making use of her power as queen and mistress of creatures, commanded the elements not to afflict their Creator, but to afford him shelter and refreshment, and wreak their vengeance upon her alone. And as related once before, at the occasion of the birth of Christ and of the journey to Jerusalem, again the wind immediately moderated and the storm abated, not daring to approach the mother and child. In return for this loving forethought, the infant Jesus commanded his angels to assist his kindest mother and to serve her as a shield against the inclemency of the weather. They immediately complied and constructed a resplendent and beautiful globe round about and over their incarnate God and his mother and her spouse. In this they were protected and defended more effectually than all the wealthy and powerful of the world in their palaces and rich garments. The same they did several times during the journey through the desert. Nevertheless, they were in want of food, and they were destitute of other things unprovidable by their own mere human effort. But the Lord allowed them to fall into this need in order that, listening to the acceptable prayers of his spouse, he might make provision also for this by the hands of the angels. They brought them delicious bread and well-seasoned fruits, and moreover a most delicious drink, all of which they administered and served with their own hands. Then all of them together sang hymns of praise and thanksgiving to the Lord, who gives food to all creatures at opportune times, in order that the poor may eat and be filled. Psalms 135:25, whose eyes and hopes are fixed upon his kingly providence and bounty. Of such a kind was the delicate feast with which the Lord regaled his 3 exiled wanderers in the desert of Beersheba. 3 Kings 19:3. For it was the same desert in which Elias, fleeing from Jezebel, was comforted by the hearth cake brought to him by the angel in order that he might travel to Horeb Mount. Yet neither this bread nor the bread and meat which once before the ravens had miraculously brought him every morning, and even at the torrent of Kerith, nor the manna which fell from heaven for the Israelites, although it was called the bread of angels and dropped from heaven, nor the quails which were carried to them by the African winds, nor the cloud tent which overshadowed them, none of all these could be compared to the succor and relief which the Lord afforded to his only begotten and to his mother and Saint Joseph. For these favors were not to be conferred upon a prophet or upon an ungrateful and unthinking people, but they were intended for the nourishment and protection of a God incarnate, for his true mother. They were intended for the preservation of the natural life of Christ, on which depended the eternal life of the whole human race. But if this food was worthy of the excellence of those who were invited, so was also the thanksgiving and gratitude worthy of the blessings conferred. In order that all this might be so much the more opportune, the Lord permitted the necessity to become extreme, and thus naturally call into play the assistance of heaven. Let the poor rejoice in this example. Let the hungry confide. Let the destitute take new courage. Let none complain of divine providence, no matter how afflicted and needy they may find themselves to be. When has the Lord ever failed him who hoped in his assistance? Psalms 17:31. When has he ever turned away his countenance from his afflicted and needy children? We are brothers of his only Son incarnate, children and heirs of his blessings, and also children of his kindest mother. Why then, ye children of God and of this most holy mother, do you continue to distress such parents in your poverty? Why do you deprive them of this honor and yourselves of the privilege of being assisted and sustained by them? Come to them with humble confidence, so that they may look upon you with the eyes of parents and listen to your crying needs. The arms of this lady are stretched out toward the poor, and her hands opened for the needy. And you, ye rich of this world, why will you confide so much in your uncertain riches at the imminent danger of losing your faith, of piling up for yourselves heaviest cares and sorrows as mentioned by the Apostle? By your avarice you fail to conduct yourselves as children of God or of his mother. By your actions you make of yourselves spurious offsprings, for legitimate children confide in the care and love of their parents, and abhor trusting in others, who are not only strangers but enemies. These truths are manifest to me by the divine light, and charity compels me thus to speak. The Most High Father not only provided nourishment for our pilgrims, but also visible relief against the tediousness of this journey and continued solitude. It happened a few times when the Heavenly Lady rested on the ground from her fatigue that, as on other occasions, a great multitude of birds came flying toward her from the mountains. By the sweetness of their warbling and the variety of their plumage, they sought to entertain and delight her, perching on her shoulders and hands with signs of great joy. The most prudent queen gently received them and invited them to acknowledge their Creator by their songs and to be thankful for his having created them so beautiful and arrayed them in their gorgeous plumage, given them the air and the earth for their enjoyment, and provided them with daily food and sustenance. The birds responded to her exhortations with joyous movements and sweet warblings, while the loving mother joined them with still more sweet and melodious songs for the infant Jesus, extolling and blessing him, and acknowledging him as her God and her Son, and as the author of all these wonders. Also the holy angels took part in these colloquies so full of sweetness, and alternated their offerings of praise with that of the great lady and of these simple birds. Beautiful. All this produced a harmony more perceptible by the spirit than by the senses, and of admirable concord for the rational soul. At other times the heavenly princess conversed with the child and said, quote, "My love and light of my soul, how can I diminish thy labor? How can I relieve thee of thy hardships? What can I do to lighten the sufferings of this journey? Oh, would that I could carry thee not in my arms, but in my bosom, and make for thee a soft couch in my heart, in order that thou mayest rest there without fatigue." Unquote. And the sweetest Jesus replied, quote, "My beloved mother, very easily do I rest in thy arms while making this journey, and reclining on thy breast, I am delighted by thy affection and entertained by thy words." Unquote. Sometimes the son and mother conversed with each other interiorly, and these conversations were so exalted and divine that our words cannot express them. Saint Joseph shared in many of these mysteries and consolations, and thus he eased his journey, forgot his hardships, feeling within himself the delight and sweetness of such companionship. Yet he did not hear or perceive what the child said audibly to his mother, for at that time of the life of Jesus, this favor was reserved for her alone, as I have already remarked above. In this manner, our exiles proceeded on their way to Egypt. Instruction vouchsafed by the Most Holy Mary, Our Lady. My daughter, just as those who know the Lord also know how to trust in him, so those who do not hope in his goodness and immense love have no perfect knowledge of the majesty of God. On account of the want of faith and hope, this love also is deficient, for we readily place our love in whom we have confidence and in whom we esteem. In this error lies the source of all the damage done to mortals, for they have such a low conception of the infinite bounty which gave them being and which preserves them, that they fail to place full confidence in their God. Failing in this way, they also fail in the love due to him, and they divert it towards the creatures. They esteem in them what they are seeking, namely power, riches, vain honor, and ostentation. Although the faithful can remedy these injurious influences by faith and hope, yet they allow these virtues to remain dead and unused, and debase themselves to the level of worthless creatures. Those who have riches trust in them, and those who have none greedily haste after them. Some procure them by their very reprehensible ways and means. Some confide in influential persons, praising and flattering them. And thus it happens that very few seek the Lord in such a way as to deserve his providential care. Very few trust in God and acknowledge him as their Father, who is willing to provide for his children, who will nourish and sustain them without fail in all necessities. This deceitful error has filled the earth with lovers of the world, has filled it with avarice and concupiscence against the law of the Creator, has made men insane in their desires, for all of them commonly strive after riches and earthly possessions, claiming thereby merely to satisfy their needs, which is only a pretext for hiding their want of interest in higher things. In reality, they lie to themselves abominably, since they are seeking the superfluous, not what is really necessary, but what ministers to worldly pride. If men would confine their desires to want what is really necessary, It would be unreasonable to put any confidence in creatures instead of placing it in God alone, who ineffably provides even for the young ravens with no less solicitude than if their crowings were prayers sent up to their Creator for help. Proverbs 28:8. Secure in this confidence, I was not alarmed in my exile and prolonged journey. Since I trusted in the Lord, He provided for me in the time of my need. Thou also, my daughter, who art aware of this exalted providence, shouldest not afflict thyself in the time of need, nor neglect thy duties in order to make provision for them, nor confide in human efforts, nor in creatures. After having done what is required of thee, the most efficacious means is to confide in the Lord without being disturbed or confused. Hope patiently, even when help is somewhat delayed. It will always be at hand and at a time when it will do most good, and when the paternal love of the Lord can manifest itself most conveniently and openly. Thus it happened with me and my spouse in the time of our destitution and necessity. Those that do not bear with adversity and do not put up with privations, who turn toward dried up cisterns, Jeremiah 2:5, trusting in deceit and in the powerful of this world, those who are not moderate in their desires and greedily covet what is unnecessary for the sustenance of life, those that anxiously cling to what they possess, fearing that it may be diminished and withholding the alms due to the poor, all of them have reasons to dread lest divine providence, showing itself just as niggardly in caring for them as they are in their confidence and in their charities to the poor, deprive them of what they could otherwise easily expect to receive at his hands. But the Father in heaven, who lets the sun rise over the just and the unjust, Matthew 5:45, and lets the rain fall on the good and the bad, nevertheless helps all, giving them life and nourishment. However, just as his blessings are distributed to the good and to the bad, so also it cannot be a rule with God to give greater temporal goods to the good and less to the bad. On the contrary, he prefers that the chosen and predestined ones be poor, James 2:5, both because they thus gain more merit and reward, and because there are few who know how to use wealth properly and who can retain it without inordinate greed. Although my most holy Son and I had nothing to fear from this danger, yet he wished to furnish this example to men and to teach them this science through which eternal life comes to them. Let's see. I'm going to stop there for tonight. Praise, love, and glory be to our Lord Jesus Christ, King, eternal King. May God bless and keep you.